Command Point is sponsored by Crossfire Games. Use code CommandPoint25 at checkout to get 5% off your next purchase. Link in the description.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Command Point. And it is the second day of Kill Team here. And on the second day of Kill Team, I am bringing you Mr. George Armour of Warpcoven fame, NYO fame, Ontario fame. George, how's it going?
It's going well, thanks. Second episode, second time on the 12 Days of Christmas. Looking forward
Yes.
to sharing some Warpcoven secrets.
You were in the original 12 years ago, 2 years ago, talking about Warpcoven when they were a very different team, and I felt like it would be a disservice not to have you come back and talk about the new and improved, one might say, Warpcoven. You've done very well with them. You won New York Open with them, and you took them into the top 8 of the World Championships. So, very qualified here. Just to get us started, for somebody that is picking a new team, that is trying to decide what they want to play in Kill Team, or maybe they're picking a new team, why do you think somebody should get into Warpcoven? What about it, whether it be playstyle, aesthetic? How can you describe how this team captured you, I guess?
So I think the first thing to talk about is how cool the models are. I'm probably in the minority. I love the Zangor bird goats. I just think they're really goofy and cool.
Okay.
I've got quite like a grimdark scheme for mine. And then the rubrics and the sorcerers, like the conversion opportunities with the Zinch, or like the extra like mutated limbs and stuff like that. I thought they were really cool models. And something a bit different from Chaos, instead of like the standard spikes. I quite like the kind of the body horror aspect of Zinch rather than the more like space Middle East and space Mesopotamian aspects of the faction. But yeah, as to like a playstyle faction, about how they play itself, they're a really flexible team. They reward good knowledge of game principles. They really reward you for kind of coming up with like a unique plan for every different matchup, every different board, every different mission, and they're just a really fun team to play and pilot if you like thinking about the game.
Very cool. Yeah, it's very Zinchi, right? You have to have you've said it to me before, you have to have like a grand plan when you're playing Warpcoven, which is, I can't think of anything more suitable.
Yes, until it all falls apart in 2023.
Yeah, we don't talk about
used
that. So I guess to pivot off of that, so for somebody that did decide to pick up Warpcoven and they're learning the team, what is, I guess, something for you, like a good piece of advice that can kind of jumpstart somebody's progress early on, is specifically something that kind of maybe after a few games of playing the team clicked for you and you were like, oh my God, this is so, I wish I was thinking about it this way 2 games ago, and it just made everything kind of easier.
Okay, so I'd say there's kind of 2 main things. The first thing is that you have to look at the structure of the team. The team centers around 3 very powerful sorcerer models, and if you're wanting to do well with the team, you have to figure out a way of getting the most out of them without being too risky in the early game. So you want to be, but luckily the team has quite a few tools that let you do that, keep them safe while still impacting the board state in the early game. So this is like the first aspect of it. They can set up a lot of non-reciprocal threats in the early game through various means. For example, with the Temporal Flux token from the Tempurian Sorcerer, which lets you move, and at the end of your move, if you're wholly within the token, you can teleport back to where they once were. So that's one way of projecting threat without being threatened yourself. The other way, which is a very important ploy, is the Capricious Plan that lets you flip at the end of your activation, flip your order. So if you shoot something, you can at the end of your action dash away and flip your order back to conceal. And the third way of doing this is with the various Seek spells on the Warpfire Sorcerer. That lets you project threat from your back line against anyone trying to stage in the midboard. And yeah, the final way is by measuring threat ranges, like with your flying sorcerer, with the immaterial boon, the immaterial flight boon, you can sometimes set up a way where you can charge an enemy without getting charged or shot at yourself. So it's very kind of board control kind of centered team in the early game.
Okay, really cool. So I guess I do want to talk. I mean, this is a good team to talk about this with. Loadouts. So obviously, as far as like a list building perspective goes, some kill teams are a little more expansive than others, and I think Warpcoven is probably one of, if not the most expansive. So, what are the kinds of choices that you make in list building, and what helps you decide which operatives to take and which operatives to leave home?
Yeah, so as you said, you have different forms of list building. So you have each of the three sorcerers has a boon, which is a special rule that they can get given at the beginning of each battle. And you can pick the boons aren't currently locked to your roster, or to your or what you submit to your tournament. So you can change these up depending on who or what you're playing and what mission you're on. So the most common boons that I have been running recently are the Immaterial Flight Sorcerer on Volcus and Open on the Destiny Sorcerer, the Astral Bombardment, which gives you Devastating 1 on one of your spells. I normally pair this with the Mind Burn ability from the Warpfire Sorcerer, which is a very strong way of projecting threat in the early game. And I've normally been taking the Temperian Sorcerer with Master of the Immaterium, which adds 3 inches to their psychic support abilities. So he can heal someone within 9 inches. And depending on your TO and the area you play, it also extends the teleport range of the Temporal Flux token, which gives you a lot more flexibility about where you can place and set up with that. And then the other aspect of the team building as well is the composition of how many rubrics and how many Zangors you take. So you're generally always taking the 3 sorcerers as a given. So then you have the choice between taking up to 3 more rubrics or up to 6 sorcerers, up to 6 Zangors. Yeah. So I'd say if you're just starting out the team, the best kind of default list that I generally recommend to a new player would be 3 sorcerers, 2 rubrics, and 2 Zangors, normally the champion and the icon bearer. This gives you 7 activations, which is 1 more than a normal Power Armor team. So lets you have the last say in the early turns. And it also gives you a few disposable bodies, and you can kind of figure out which aspect of the support pieces you like more. Are you more of like a rubric person, or do you like the extra activations from the goats?
Okay, really cool. Yeah. So I guess last question about like turn 0 stuff. TAC Ops. I think everybody has questions about TAC Ops right now. We're all learning the new TAC Ops for the new edition. What do you like the most with Warpcoven?
So yeah, as everything, it always depends.
Yeah.
But luckily, Warpcoven are blessed with 2 very strong TAC Op archetypes, which suit their game plan very well. They have security. So depending on the board, if Take Ground is on offer, which is especially good on some of the Volcus maps where the big strongholds straddle the middle of the kill zone. If you think that's scoreable, I often take that. That's very easily 5 or 6 points, depending if you got a very solid game plan with that, which is great. The other option is with the recon ones. So if you're up against a elite opponent who you know is going to be very aggressive, either just if you play them a lot in your local scene, or if the mission kind of calls for it, you can sometimes take confirmed kill against elites, which can be okay. That gives your opponent a little bit more of counterplay compared to plant beacons, which is a very, very good default to kind of go to. It lets you score at will. It lets you play a bit more of a kind of cagey game plan, and you have various tools at your disposal to help you alleviate the pressure on your action economy. So the normal Zangors, they can plant the beacon for free in your opponent's territory. There's a boon that lets you do a mission action for free with your sorcerers that lasts until the end of the turning point, which is very strong. And if you are playing against a horde or a mid range and you have counteract up, you can often counteract Palace Beacon with the rubrics or the sorcerers, which is an extra way of gaining a bit of extra value out of your activations and operatives. So yeah, very strong.
Yeah, I really like that piece of advice. The counteracting to Plant Beacon is just like not something you think about because a lot of the elite teams are, like Legionary floating around. They can't take recon. Phobos players are probably already onto that, but that's a really good piece of advice there. So, next question. So I liked in the previous years, I would talk about turn one with the guests, and turn one is obviously pretty different nowadays. It's a lot more cagey. So what I want to ask you about really is like that early game, turn one, turn two. How do you like to stage and set up? Like, what are some of your early goals?
So it obviously depends on the map and your opponent. So when I'm deploying my operatives, so I normally try to put my Warpfire Sorcerer with a good visibility line to threaten the Firestorm and the Mind Burn down the map. It's especially good on Into the Dark where there's just light cover. So that can sometimes limit the staging opportunities of your opponent. So you want them in a place where they can threaten that easily. So if you have it poking around, say if you're on like a Volcus L shape, one of the strongholds or ruins, if you deploy in the corner, you can cast full rerolls on someone with a light, mind burn them, and then you can move out of visibility, which is quite a strong play. It's pretty free, and it gives you some good early pressure. The other main thing that I like to set up is at the beginning is think where I want to stage my flying sorcerer or my aggressive sorcerer, and who I want to use the temporal flux token on. Because if you can go into turning point 2 with the temporal flux token on an operative in a quite safe space, it just adds so much pressure to your opponent and really makes them playing the mission, playing the mid-board objectives and staging quite difficult. So they're the main two things you can kind of think of. In terms of kind of sending operatives forward, I definitely like keeping my sorcerers back until the beginning of turning point 3. I kind of use my rubrics and my Zangors as like kind of first wave to kind of flush out the opponent's operatives, trying to kind of force them to kind of deal with them, get a few operatives engaged. And then once the kind of skirmish has kind of begun, you can then zap anything that kind of tries to deal with the rubrics and the Zangors with the Doombolt Sorcerer or some other very good shooting.
Perfect.
But
really interesting.
That normally happens turning point 2 and 3. So you want to kind of keep your important kind of queen pieces back, your 3 sorcerers, but just in a position to kind of threaten the mid-board turning point 2 if your opponent gets too aggressive. But you definitely don't be losing them early. But you don't really, that's basically.
I think that's a really good piece of advice. Yeah, I think that's good advice because I think a lot of people who see this team, their first instinct when they see the sorcerers are, these models are so strong, they're so awesome, they're like hero pieces. I want to throw them forward and just get involved. But I think the cagier style with them is actually probably a lot better.
Yeah, it's definitely good, especially when you combine it with some of the other abilities and defensive ploys.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so next up, we have a fun question. George, I want you to think about, and I probably definitely asked you this 2 years ago, but it's a very different team now. So I'd like you to try and think about the coolest, flashiest play that you've ever pulled off with Warpcoven. Something that, like, you did it and you're like, wow, this is the coolest team. I'm so glad I'm playing this team. Or something like, maybe it was at a tournament and somebody at the table next to you might have even been like, what did you just do? Plays like that. Like, what's the coolest, flashiest play you can think of with Warpcoven?
Oh, there's quite a few. It's quite a combo-oriented team once you get it running. So it probably has to be something with the Destiny Sorcerer with Fly. So if you put him behind a Volcus on top of like a Volcus Vantage on one of like the short-term deployment Volcus boards. What I've done against a poor Legionary player is I flew onto his home objective on Sabotage. I doom-bolted one of the Marines guarding the point, killed him with a 5. I had a 5 and a 6 retained from Fate Itself as my weapon, the strategic ploy that lets you swap out your dice.
Yeah.
One shot that Marine. I then cast the APL debuff on the other Marine that was on the point, use my scrolls, which is a Sorcerer Scrolls, which is an equipment that lets you do choose a boon for free from Mutant Appendage. I sabotaged their point because I had 3 APL compared to their 2, and then I teleported back to the top of the vantage where my Temporal Flux token was and flipped to conceal.
Oh my
And
goodness.
there was nothing my opponent could do about it, so that was a very big swing.
That's like a that reminds me of last edition playing Higher Attack. I feel like you just did like 6 actions in that one sequence. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was nuts. So it was move, shoot, debuff, mission action for free, teleport back, and then flip to conceal. Yeah,
and then crazy. If you wanted to, if you needed to, you didn't need to because you're up there. You could have dashed too, so that could have been 7 actions.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Wild. So, all right, George, we're at the last question. This is the most important question. So last year I asked people, I believe last year I asked favorite Christmas song, it might have been. This year I'm going a different direction. I'm saying try to think of, tell me really your favorite, it could be a food or a drink, but your favorite like treat on Christmas. It can be, again, anything. It can be food, drink, something you particularly enjoy in the holidays.
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. So being English, my traditional meal is the turkey. We have Christmas turkey.
Okay.
So my favorite part of that is the stuffing. But my dad, it's a family tradition where we do something called bread sauce, which sounds absolutely horrendous, but I promise you it is it's pretty good. It's basically bread cooked in milk. Which, yeah, very stereotypical of the of British cuisine, but yeah.
Amazing. That's a very unique answer. I don't think I'm going to get that answer again from anybody else. And I'm very excited to just like hear. I mean, we've got 10 more of these to go. I'm excited to hear the other answers that I get on this question because this is always my favorite part of doing these videos. Well, thank you again, George, for coming back on to the 12 Days of Kill Team. To everybody watching, I promise the next episode will not be a Chaos team. We've done 2 Chaos Marine teams on the first 2 days of Kill Team. We're going to switch it up tomorrow, so stay tuned. If we haven't hit 10,000 subscribers yet, guys, please subscribe if you haven't. We are so desperately close, and we're going to throw a party when we do. Don't quote us on that. But, yeah, anyway, thank you again, George, for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody, take it easy.